As she grew increasingly critical of the Biden administration and increasingly involved with the Trump campaign, Tulsi Gabbard noticed changes as she went to the airport. She had more screening. Federal agents with dogs showing up for her flights. Other federal agents followed her on the plane and reported back on her activity. When I learned of this, I launched an investigation into the TSA's Quiet Skies program and the Biden administration's weaponization of watch lists against everyday Americans. Under public scrutiny, the Biden administration removed now Director of National Intelligence Gabbard from the program, but they spent the remainder of their time in office stonewalling any investigation. Thankfully, that era is over. President Trump himself, a victim of government weaponization, set out to reverse the previous administration's targeting of the very citizens it is sworn to protect. Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem has taken decisive action to eliminate bureaucratic obstacles, resisting transparency. We are finally getting answers. And now we know exactly why the previous administration fought so hard to keep us in the dark. Director Gabbard was surveilled on at least 5 domestic flights by federal air marshals under quiet skies. Internal records for her targeting show her congressional portrait and that she was a former congresswoman from Hawaii. So there was no doubt they knew who they were monitoring. Multiple concerns were raised internally, and one air marshal asked a colleague, "Why the heck is she a quiet skies suspect?" If this can happen to a combat veteran, a lieutenant colonel in the Army Reserve, and now Director of National Intelligence, it can happen to anyone. And it did. Today, for the first time, you will hear directly from a federal air marshal whose wife was labeled a domestic terrorist simply for engaging in protected First Amendment activity. Records show the FBI labeled her as a domestic terrorist for unlawful entry into the Capitol on January 6. But she didn't enter the Capitol. She came for a public support of the president, and they knew it. Her phone location data did not put her inside the Capitol. Facial recognition did not identify her inside. She had no criminal record and no history of extremist views. What they did know is that this Catholic school teacher from Texas supported President Trump and went to Washington to attend his rally at the Ellipse. That was not enough for the government. That was not enough to label her a suspected domestic terrorist. For 2 years, her family was surveilled when they flew. This was not an isolated case. It happened to hundreds of Americans. It happened because the TSA used First Amendment protected activity as a predicate for watch listing Americans. That's unconstitutional, of course. First Amendment activity cannot be the sole basis for watch listing someone, but sole basis is an important caveat, and it's an opening the TSA exploited. Today, we will release internal TSA records that reveal how the agency authorized First Amendment activity to be used to justify the surveillance of Americans with no evidence and no recourse. Using broad and vague authorities, TSA deemed hundreds of Americans as threats to national security simply for holding opposing political views. The federal government used its investigative authorities, anonymous tips, and university research institutions to build a flimsy case to put them on the watch list. They didn't just